primarily concentrated on the Eastern European countries, partly because that's where I hail from myself, and partly because I felt that there are many important keynotes, elements, realizations which have come from those countries and the presence of the esoteric tradition therein. Now, for instance, and this is really unpardonable, I skipped over the homeland of Dracula, Transylvania, last time, and that could be very dangerous for me, so I'm going to start something, some kind of a protection for my neck. So let me start with that. Transylvania in Latin means, although it originates in the Greek before that, Transylvania means beyond the forests. And the land, the province, which for a long time was pretty independent of Transylvania, had its own traditions and contributed, I think, considerably to the well, at least to the publicity about the esoteric tradition, because after all, we are pretty well informed by now to realize that the redoubtable Count Dracula was not a historical figure. Now, I always suspected that such was the case. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's really a very, very fine work, and I found it laudable that, I don't know where I read it, that Bishop Leadbeater, who spent a lot of time in Australia at a noted manor, where I even pride myself that I have seen a sort of a ghost of him, which is not really necessary for me to brag about, but I spent a day and an evening at a manor, and the then General Secretary promised me that he would bring me anything that they had that I could possibly want to see, and so they set me into Bishop Leadbeater's office with a nice, real old-fashioned sort of Victorian roll-top desks, you know what they look like, and then they kept bringing me in boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of mainly photographs. And you think that with these little rinky-dink things with which you take pictures now, that they take good pictures. You should have seen the photographs that were taken in the 1920s. Superb, superb. Now, of course, I only could keep them in my mind, although I did chisel a few little things out of them. But so there I was, and it's a rather small office on one of the top etages, as we call it in French, of the manor. And so I was getting kind of a little bit tired of sitting there, so I got up and went out in the corridor. Now, why I'm telling you all this, I don't know, and if I don't know, then you don't have to. So in any event, I went out on the corridor. These are long corridors, and from each of the corridors there open various rooms. So I went out and looked down the corridor toward its opposite end. And it was in the daytime, broad daylight, as I looked down, I saw, I swear to God, and I may make mistakes in a lot of things, but after a lifetime with ecclesiastical matters, I don't make any mistakes about ecclesiastical vestments. There were the corridor was being crossed because there are cross corridors too. For quite a distance was being crossed by a figure. The figure wore a purple choir's bishop cassock with, and this has been considered crucial by the locals, with a little train behind the cassock, which in old-fashioned prelatical cassocks was there. And went not too fast, not too slow, went across my sight at the end and then exited that part of the building. So I said, well, that's interesting. And so when I forget his name now, I forget almost everything that I shouldn't forget. So you have to take my advanced age into account. In any event, when the gentleman who was the Secretary General at that time, wonderful gentleman, later on I met him again in New Zealand. He was a native New Zealander, but for one term he served the Australian section. And so I asked him, you know, I don't know what it could have been. See, I'm chasing people out already. No.
It's scary.
In any event, so he said to me, when I gave him a precise description, he looked at me and he said, well, there is only one crucial factor here, and that is that his cassock had a train. You know, those trains are not very, very long, just about this long, and they drag on the floor. I think it was invented by ecclesiastical tailors to make a new one. In any event, he says there have been many bishops here, Wedgwood, Leadbeater, all kinds of them. He rattled off a bunch of names, but only one had a train, and that was Leadbeater. So he says, that in itself is a sign to you as to who was trying to get through to you. Well, I said, I hope he did get through to me, but I didn't see him anymore after that, not there anyway. But it was interesting, because it was one of those events which even in esoteric circles one does not encounter very often. I mean, when I came here in the early 50s, 53 or thereabouts, and joined this lodge, that was just the time when we bought this building. And we were quite happy with it and so forth. You know, we had an active membership. I mean, people who actually get out of bed and go to lodge, which is what I do now. At that time, and active membership of about 100 people. So for a theosophical lodge, even in the 1950s, that's a considerable number of people. In any event, nowhere in those times did I encounter so much experience of an unusual nature than in Australia. Probably because Australia is sort of located sort of way out, you know, and therefore the things are way out also. But much of it was quite enjoyable. In any event, sitting at the old gentleman's desk and looking through his photographs, it's understandable that some sort of an apparition should have appeared. And when things like this happen, you see, as a student of Jungian psychology, I always look for that mysterious quality, meaning, you know. If something happens and it doesn't mean anything, then why does it happen? So I always, when possible, I try to seek for that. And I said, all right, so what kind of meaning did this bring? And I think it brought the meaning that those who have been there, particularly Leadbeater, who after all is the one who purchased the manor, which was a beautiful big castle-like structure on top of a hill overlooking Sydney Bay, and spent a great deal of time there, that he would want to be notified that somebody who has read just about all of his books and was trying to come to terms with a lot of his message, both in a positive and a negative fashion, had come to Sydney. So I said, well, hello there. You know, it was a pleasant experience. In any event, that being the case, it brought to attention a number of other experiences that were there, and let's say an entire new chapter of the esoteric tradition and of what has been called theosophy sort of opened up to me there. And it was quite important. And Leadbeater's figure and authorship played a good deal of role in that. So at the same time, don't think that I have become a Charles Leadbeaterian, because I think that a lot of the revelations put forth by Leadbeater are faulty. Now, who am I to say that? Well, I have my own perceptions of a different kind, and I found them to be different. And so obviously, if we are going to make a judgment as to which is faulty, it's Stephan who is going to be right, Leadbeater who is going to be faulty. It's just simple as that. Although, let's say, one thing I also learned, that when it comes to the clairvoyant business, even when a reasonably good clairvoyant has particular perceptions, and you don't agree with them, look at them close, because there may be something in there that is of particular meaning, especially to you. You have to realize that when you experience any of these things, ghosts, revenants, vampires, and so forth, that these apparitions have appeared to you for no good reason. I mean, for no bad reason. They have occurred to you for a reason, and you should try to figure out their meaning. And very often the reason in them and behind them is different. And let's see, in any event, Australia is an interesting place, it has the most weird-looking animals in the world, and it has various other unusual features. And I'm always very glad that my late and good friend Joey Mills had arranged for me to take that trip and the subsequent trip on another occasion to New Zealand, because the experiences there were really quite instructive and valuable. Now, this being the case, let's say, why did I bring this up? Real good question that I'm asking myself. But no, now I know. Because, you know, Leadbeater had almost at all times when he was there in residence, he had a considerable coterie of young people around him whom he was instructing and this and that. And he was also instructing them in the clairvoyant art which he possessed. And so I saw that he said that a book like Dracula by Bram Stoker is a wonderful stimulus to the imagination. This is what you need in this business of the esoteric is imagination. Not knowledge, not things that can be regurgitated because you read them in a book, but things that even if they had been stimulated by a book or by a speaker or so, which have been subjected to the processing activity of your own unconscious. And I reflected over that a good deal, because ever since my childhood I was both lauded and excoriated for having too much imagination. See? So it's valuable for us to remember that this is true, that the imagination plays an immensely powerful role in the practice of the esoteric tradition. And when it doesn't, when it has been sort of shoved aside, then there is a problem. So that you know that the very term, the Latin term imaginatio, has been introduced at least into the Western esoteric tradition by Albertus Magnus, Saint Albert the Great, Archbishop of Regensburg in Germany, and the perennial patron of magicians, and the magical teacher of Thomas Aquinas, whose secular name was the Count of Roccasecca. So all of that, I think, adds up to something. And he said that without the imaginatio, there is no truthful esoteric experience. So it's a good thing to cultivate our imagination. It's not the same of making up lies. If you are interested in that, then you go to Washington, D.C. And there you'll find a lot of them, lies. And obviously those with whom they originate were the liars. But if you want to journey in this strange twilight zone, which is both true and not true, and which is therefore, in spite of its external appearance, is bringing you some messages, both the more obvious ones and the more secretive ones. So the imagination is extremely important. All right, so what about, the reason I brought up Transylvania was primarily because Dracula. And by the way, Dracula is a corrupted Romanian word, noun. Dracu means the devil, which comes from dragon, the same as the dragon. But when the Romanians refer to sort of colloquially to the devil, oh, he's a real devil or something like that, then they say Dracula. And even when they wish you to go to the devil, then they will say, Du-te la Dracu, go to the devil. So the Dracu is a very important person. And so Bram Stoker somehow picked up the idea that anything uncanny, mysterious, and possibly malefic in a Romanian setting would include the word Dracu. Now, since then, of course, because of Bram Stoker and his book and the by now numerous books, writings, movies that have picked this up, this is an important issue. You might say, but that's what they talk about in the Peasant Lord on Friday night. They talk about Dracu, the devil. But in any event, whatever we may say, I was very interested in this. First of all, it's the only part of my my circle of the world there that I have never been to. I've been to southern Hungary, to western Hungary, to Slovakia. I've been to the Regat, Romania, which is further out in Romania, but I've never been to Transylvania, which is really a shame to me, because for a long time, but at that time I was still very, very small, my great uncle, my grandfather's, maternal grandfather's brother, Count Nicholas Széchenyi, was the bishop, the Roman Catholic bishop of Nagyvárad, or Ordia Mare, as the Romanians call it, in Transylvania. So I really should have paid the memory of Uncle Nicholas the homage by going there, but I didn't. Then, of course, the poor man was kicked out after World War I by the Romanians, who took over that part, because, you know, there's a great deal of rivalry there between Hungarians, Serbs, Croatians, Romanians, Slovenes. You can't forget the Slovenes, because the present president of the United States has a wife who is from Slovenia. And I tell you, if quite a few of the women in Slovenia look like her, it should be worth a trip for you gentlemen. But let's say, so those were kind of the reasons why I was interested in the subject. I haven't heard about Dracula and Bram Stoker until I was about 12 years old. So by then you have a pretty good imagination. And consequently, I had many fantasies and many dreams and the little stories that I wrote about Dracula. Can you hear me? All right. So that being the case, what about this vampire business? Vampires, vampire lore, let us see, unlike werewolf lore and some other things of that sort, shape changer lore, vampire lore is one that originates in the Mediterranean area. As far as we are able to discern, the first noticeable vampires of whom some record was made were in Greece. So Greece is not only the country of Plato, of Aristotle, of Euripides and things like that, but it is also the country of Dracula. And so much so that a country that is very far from Greece, namely Germany, Germany's maybe second, maybe first greatest poet and dramatist, Friedrich von Schiller, wrote a big drama which is called The Bride of Corinth. And the Bride of Corinth is a Greek lady who has died, and her beloved is very unhappy over that fact, and he keeps going to her grave and shedding his Greek tears and all of that, and finally she comes out of the grave, and she says, "Why are you disturbing my peace?" And he said, "Well, because I love you, and all that sort of thing." Well, I said, "Oh, so all right. That being the case, so they sit down together and they talk and all this sort of thing. And he brings her probably some bottles of Retsina and you know those nice little rolled up grape leaves with something inside. So they have quite a time there, and she's very polite. And then she lets him know that what she is really after is his blood. And he says, "All right, you know, I love you. I would do anything for you. So let's see what you can do with." So she comes and, in typical vampire fashion, she bites his neck, gets a good fill up with blood, and then says, "Bye-bye, come back next time," and she goes back into the grave. And this is the Bride of Corinth by Friedrich Schiller. It's a very, very powerful, mostly verse dramatic piece. Now, all right. Schiller was a very cautious man, and even in his poems and dramas, and you know, between Schiller and Goethe, they wrote all the dramatic works of the 19th century Germany. So they were very, very important poets of Germany. So he would not have, in my opinion, but this of course is just guesswork, he would not have written such a lengthy and really quite exciting ballad, because I think that's what it was, as the Bride of Corinth, if he had not been convinced that things of this sort exist. As we go around the world, various countries, we find a small number and usually not terribly aggressive bunch of vampirical figures. But from time to time, they occur. So that, let's say, the figure of Dracula is not without some foundation in veracity. But then now there is another one which will be very welcome to those of feminist or quasi-feminist inclinations, because it has been discovered something that I was suspecting all along. But being such a humble individual, I would not come out with it in the open. And that is that Dracula was a woman. And not only that, but that Dracula was a woman with whom I have some connection. And this was discovered, or let's say, publicized in the family by my mother, not by myself. But since my mother was a very truth-speaking woman, I picked up what she had to say there. All right, there was a famous and royal family in Eastern Europe that was the Báthory family. There has been at least one king of Poland who was a Báthory, and numerous grand princes, which was their title, of Transylvania, who was also a Báthory. And as the line went on, one Báthory lady married into my maternal family, and actually she was only half a Báthory. She was a Nádasdy, because the lady, the vampire lady we are going to talk about now, was married. She had children, vampire children. Wouldn't they be cute? You know, they come along with the nice big teeth. Sometimes I wish they were a cartoonist or something. You know, I would draw vampire families and things of that sort. Why? Because they're fun. But in any event, yeah, it's my great grandmother was a Nádasdy, and a direct descendant of the vampire whom we are talking about now. And that was Elizabeth Báthory, also affectionately referred to as the Blood Countess. Now, Elizabeth Báthory was from both by birth and by marriage from a very illustrious family. But it seems that at some point in her career, she was beginning to go a little bit cuckoo, or in some other way being involved with sinister activities. And she lived the last number of years of her life in Csejte Castle in Transylvania, a beautiful old place. My mother went there, but I didn't. But that's just as well, because she told me all about it. And also it is perpetuated in one very famous big painting, Hungarian painting by one of our famous painters, and it shows a yard of a castle, maybe somewhat like the castle you have over there, but in a picture, but that's not it. That's Vajdahunyad in southern Hungary. And wouldn't you know it? Besant anticipated my coming by purchasing and hanging up a picture of a Hungarian castle. So not only does this mean that Theosophists are full of predictions, but that time they were predicting the coming of moi-même, of me. Well, if this is a little bit too wild for you, then just look at the picture, because that castle exists. There is even a smaller duplicate of it in the city of Budapest, and it's called Vajdahunyad. In fact, it was the originator of a royal family, of the Hunyadi family, because they were John Hunyadi was the famous fighter against Turks, and he became so famous, and his family became so famous, that his younger son Matthias was then elected by the nobles as the apostolic king of Hungary. And he was our Renaissance king. He amassed a vast library, of which occasionally some lost volume turns up, and which is called the Corvina. And it's the Corvina because the coat of arms of the Hunyadi family is a corvo, which means a raven. And so in each one of the books, in some primitive fashion, no doubt, there is an imprint made of the raven. This was the library of the raven. Now, why that is related to vampires, I don't know, because ravens have not been known to be vampirical. But in any event, let's say this is the family connection. It's one of the reasons why my mother wanted to find more about Elizabeth Bathory. Well, as a matter of actual, unmistakable history, the Countess Elizabeth Bathory was investigated, found guilty, and convicted of killing a large number of peasant girls, young women in her area, and subsequently was imprisoned in her own castle in a room where they walled in the door, and so I don't think she had too much company after that. In any event, this has now been established as history. Now, it seems, although this may have been influenced by the Bram Stoker story, that her, or a key factor in her murdering all these girls was their blood, that she was seeking blood. In fact, in the story in the family has been that she was getting older, like we all do, and as the result of that, her skin was not as nice and smooth as it used to be. So she had a servant girl combing her hair, and while doing so with the comb or something, the servant girl scratched Elizabeth's neck or face, and blood started flowing. Subsequently, when looking into the mirror, she is supposed to have imagined or seen that the part of her body which was covered by blood, by the blood of her victim, was much more beautiful, much more intact, much more white, which was the big deal in those days. Hundreds and hundreds of years you had to have a tan, but not then. So she used that blood and then started taking regular baths in blood. This is the story. Some of the historians claim this is embellished with a lot of blood. Heaven knows what really happened. However, the fame of the vampire woman, of the blood countess, continued to the present time, even until a British theatre man, Bram Stoker by name, took the train over the Borgo Pass and drove into Transylvania and picked up the story on the way that this is a country of vampires, and that there was a famous landowner here hundreds of years ago who wanted to bathe in blood, and in order to secure that blood, had a good many young women, only women, slaughtered. Now, why did he come up with the figure of Count Dracula? Because he was a Victorian gentleman, and he could not write a book about a bloodthirsty Hungarian woman. Instead of that, he made up Count Dracula. At least he kept the nobility title, for which I will always respect him, because at least where you have the dreadful Dracula, you also have him as a count. In any event, there is the story of Dracula. Now, Dracula, I think, primarily because of what? Because of Hollywood. Because 1931, the talkie movie of Hollywood, with the Hungarian actor Béla Lugosi, who came on one of the first talkies, the first talkie movie, came on the screen and became very, very, before that it was made into a stage play. After all, Bram Stoker was very active with the theater. He was the theater manager of a famous, that's it. I couldn't make out the name, but that's it. Henry Irving, yeah. So let's say he was definitely affinitized to the theater. The actor, in turn, became very famous on account of the Dracula movie, and which is a little bit closer to us here and even to me personally, he became, until the day of his death, a close friend of Manly Palmer Hall. This is now the actor Béla Lugosi. Yet actually, if you want to be very pedantic, his name was not Lugosi. Part of his name was Lugosi. And why is that? Because in the Hungarian nobility, a nobleman receives a predicate or two, and that's meaning from so-and-so. And so the Lugosi family is a poor Transylvanian family in a village, but one of the grand princes of Transylvania made them nobles. You know, the Transylvanian princes were very generous people. They would ride down a village and they pick out people. Hey, Joseph, hey, Janos, come over here. Now you are Janos of Kisfalu or something. And from then on the family bore the predicate of nobility, you know. In any event, he was very interested in it because his family was Transylvanian too. And so he played first the stage play, Bela Lugosi did, of Dracula, and then later on the movie. Now you're greatly informed about something. You haven't heard anything occult. You say that you wasted your time if you thought that you were going to hear something about the esoteric tradition. But you know, every weird thing in the world, I would venture to suggest, if you look into it deep enough, contains something instructive, something important, something insight-producing, and is worth your attention. Ordinary things are really not worth attention. And that is why this stupid architecture, modern architecture, just in the few decades that I have lived here, Hollywood has been transformed into a city of ugly, detestable, and to be abominated buildings. If you look at the old buildings, which I knew when I came here in 1953, they were, if not, they were not a palazzo in Rome, but they were still pretty nice. But most of the things we've got now are awful, detestable, ugly, and so forth. Why I brought that up, I don't really know, but I think that as one of the great theosophical writers, Ernest Wood, had written in a very lovely small book that he wrote, had written that one path to the divine is beauty. From that we can deduce that one path away from the divine is ugliness. So you may wish to keep that in mind. In any event, we should avail ourselves, especially agricultural. I think I missed my calling. I should have become active in agriculture, because I always look at the buildings, and I'm either pleased or not pleased by them. And the not pleasing has greatly outnumbered the pleasure that I have experienced in recent years in agriculture. It's ugly as sin. It's even impractical for the most part, modern architecture. And I tell you the worst thing about it. The worst thing is that it started with a German architect named Bauhaus. And Bauhaus's idea was to build these very simple, very undecorated houses. And then when World War I ended, then the people who got hold of Mr. Bauhaus were the communists, the German communists. Why? Because they were cheap to build, they were ugly to look at, and the people were even then were not very, did not consider them very worthy of their living there. And so they thought that this would be very, very helpful. They started building them in Moscow and in various places of that sort. So you see, ugliness is a problem. And it's a psychological issue which needs to be considered. Because if you look at medieval art, look at Hans Holbein and his engravers and things like that. When the devil is depicted, when death is depicted, they are invaluable, ugly. So evil was considered by the ancients ugly. Good was considered beautiful. And from that you can also deduce that the good in turn that you may practice as an artist, as an admirer or so forth, will turn out beautiful. Go and look at the Renaissance Italy. Travel up and down in Italy in this beautiful, marvelous churches and palazzos and things of that sort. Why? Why? Because the Renaissance artists knew, with a kind of gnosis, that if they create something beautiful, they are going to create beautiful feelings. They are going to create ultimately beautiful life, which is really a pretty desirable condition. All right, so much about the vampires. So, is there any real truth, as we call it, to the vampire story? I wouldn't be able to tell you. I know that back in the 18th century, under the great Empress Maria Theresia, also King of Hungary, because the Hungarians would not expect a woman as king. And so she was crowned the King of Hungary. Very, very interesting. She wore the Holy Crown of Saint Stephan. Anyway, under the rulership of the Empress Elizabeth of Austria-Hungary, there were reports that came in from the Balkans, from what would now be Serbia, Croatia, and that neck of the woods, wherein the local authorities were complaining that strange things were happening. Graves were opened, that's what I thought they were first a matter of grave robbery. No, graves were opened. And the people in the graves had come out. And they had attacked other people, primarily, seemingly wanting their blood. Montague Summers, a rather famous occult writer of the early 20th century, has them all listed in a very, very profound manner. So, things do happen. But I would say their prevalence or their function in the economy of occult nature is very, very little. So with that we can go from the Balkans. Let's say, I think we brought up last time the issue of, well, to put it quite frankly, of blood sacrifice. Now I can tell you that much, that I have seen with my own eyes numerous houses, the countryside, peasants' houses. When they built a new house, they took very great care with the last step before entering the house. And I asked my father, what's the deal, with that? Oh, he said, that's simple. They killed the cat and buried it there. Well, I was more fond of dogs than of cats, so I wasn't all that terrified. But let us see why. Because if there is a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, in the foundation of the building, the building will be thereby in various ways protected. This is the folk custom. And I bet you anything that even after the Red Star over the country and all the communists bought to death, the kitty cats still find their way under a Hungarian threshold now and then. So let's say you have there the remnant of ancient customs where it has various ideas, and I don't think that it is the blood, but I think what it is the willingness of the owner to give up, in this case, a beautiful kitty cat that they probably like, because as they offer this up to the greater forces, it will bring good luck to the house. And there are variations of that who are downright ridiculous. For instance, both in the German-speaking and French-speaking countries, if you kill a spider, matin chagrin, then you kill something bad. You kill your bad luck which you kill a spider in the morning. Matin chagrin in the morning. And as the day goes on, if you kill the spider, it will bring you, in the end it will bring you luck. But you have to know which time of the day to kill it. Well, it's, that can cause difficulty. For instance, matin, let's say nuit, to kill a spider in the evening brings you bad luck. So you shouldn't do it. So my mother said when she encountered, and we had a good many spiders, when she encountered a spider in the house, she locked it in some enclosure, like maybe one of the old-fashioned, I'm mixing my languages, anyway, somebody speaks German? No. Somebody speaks Hungarian? No. But then I have to come up with it. A container like a box for the matchbox, yeah. So you put the spider in the matchbox, you wait till morning, and then you kill it in the morning. Because then it will bring you good luck. Previously it would have brought you bad luck. And then another one is when you find the spider too close to you, it will bring you luck the third day. So you have to keep in mind how many days you should count up. Of course, these are all, by Victorian terms, we might call them childish superstitions. But who is to say that in some curious ways, more than one way probably, they don't contain an element of even factual truth. So take it to heart. I hope you don't have too many spiders. We don't have all kinds of critters in the Hollywood hills, but not too many spiders. But of course, we know that there are poisonous spiders even here and so forth. So it's the complex idea of sacrificing a life, but at the same time also giving up something that is yours. Now, I don't think I ever felt very sad about giving up a spider, but some people may. I know people who loved spiders. So we need to keep these principles in our heads, because they in turn lead to recognitions in different areas. Let me conclude this section by saying that there are rumors of the revenants, as you call them in French, the ones who come back, the backcomers, vampires, who come out of the grave, and that they usually take blood, take life. The blood is the life, Mr. Renfield, do you remember? But, on the other hand, let's say the occult significance of this, I think, is minimal. So why did I let me to say that it was a good thing for the kids to read Dracula? I think purely because it calls forth the imagination, and with that stimulated imagination, all kinds of things can happen. So Madame Blavatsky had a lot of connections with the Balkans. A lot of her relatives were in Balkan countries, because the Balkan countries, almost without exception, turned to the Eastern Orthodox religion. The missionaries who came to Serbia, particularly Serbia, Bulgaria, and several other countries, they came from Russia. So let us say the Orthodox customs had rubbed off on these people. To my somewhat dismay, they also rubbed off in my native Hungary, which had a lot of trouble, especially lately, as you may have seen, with Hungary. And nevertheless, actually in the along my other useless studies, I'm also a student of liturgical customs and so forth. And there are all kinds of church activities in the Hungarian Roman Catholic Church, which are taken from the Orthodox Church, because the crown, the Hungarian royal crown, the Holy Crown of Saint Stephan, consists of two parts. The lower part is a diadem with beautiful icons on it. The upper part has been, I think, a big chalice with the top cut off, and it makes round. This together adds up. So, and the entire crown was sent to the Hungarian King Stephan by the Pope, who said that he sent this to him because while the Pope was only apostolic, that the King of Hungary was an apostle, because he converted all the Hungarians to Christianity, which I'm sure was a difficult task, especially if you told them, well, you know, you can't go with the neighbor's wife. No. You only should drink 1 liter of wine an hour. No. All of these things must have sat very badly with the Hungarians. But they did it because Saint Stephan, as he became, told it to them. So let us say there are many influences, and now there is another one, which is in part the place of which we heard so much lately, the Ukraine. because even before the Ukrainian-Russian war, there were a lot of Ukrainians or people of nebulously Ukrainian family who had fled to Hungary. And they are all, or most of them are, what are called Uniate Catholics, which means that they use the Orthodox rituals, but they are under the Pope. That was also done under Maria Theresia, who made a pact with the Pope that if they were refugees, and that if these Ruthenian and Russian refugees fled to Hungary, if they accepted the supremacy of the Pope, they could remain with their ancient rituals. And don't forget, the priests also could marry. In fact, just recently, my cousin, who is in Austria, had met here for social purposes to show the countryside also an entire family. And the family is, on top of it all, the priest of the Uniate Rite is a Count Potocki. And Count Potocki has about, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 children. After all, he is a priest who can marry. The only other Count Potocki I met was in New Zealand, and he was a real eccentric. But he was very nice to me, which if all eccentrics were really nice to me, I would be a happy guy, you see, but they are not. In any event, let's say there are Slavic elements, and there are just basic European esoteric traditions that have come, and that Madame Blavatsky already as a little girl learned. A lot of it she learned from her great-grandfather, and a lot of the letters which she had written to her great-grandfather have now been published in the American Theosophical magazine, in Quest magazine, because you can see that there was a rumor to that effect, that there was somebody, an elder in her family, who was terribly fond of alchemy, and it was the great-grandfather. So, in any event, look up the last, if they are available to you, or you can order them from Wheaton. Look up the last 2 issues of Quest magazine. And in a certain section you will find the previously unknown and unpublished letters of Madame Blavatsky. And they are primarily to her great-grandfather, and 2 also to her cousin, the famous statesman Alexander Dondukov-Korsakov was one of the last great ministers of the Tsar before the war. And so, you know, these were addressed to real people, and they were all her friends. So we need to keep this in mind, that there were, like the alchemical tradition, if understood in certain ways. I can tell you this much because I struggled with it for years, and I have some pretty good alchemic books at home. That the alchemical tradition, depending on your status of consciousness, will mean one thing or it will mean another thing. And if you are lucky, maybe more than luck, if you have a certain development within your own psyche, then it will mean very important and valuable things to you. And apparently Madame Blavatsky had that capacity already as a teenager to extract these valuable elements from the alchemical books of her great-grandfather. And then she would write to great-grandfather, say, you know what I found in your books? How about this? And she was quite a trickster, as we know, by subsequent developments also. But let's say, so the esoteric tradition was available. And it was available in various ways. And especially to people who knew how to read it, how to translate the symbolism of the many alchemical codices, to them it could do a great deal of good. Those who didn't went out to make gold. Isn't that what happens now? Sure. The people who don't understand the progression in the spirit, they try to make progression in the bank vault, in the stock market and things like that, not realizing that earthly treasures are the symbols of the one great treasure that we are all looking for, and which with God's help we are going to find. So Blavatsky had a good background, but more than that, she had a natural inclination toward that background. And this is true generally. Well, I can't quote statistics to you, but let's say I have seen in my own example and in people whom I knew, my friends and relatives, there are certain people, they are still really children. And they can see things that aren't there, they can hear things that aren't there, and as soon as they know how to read, they'll read the secret doctrine. So, these things exist. So you got to watch the talents, the inclinations of children. I should talk, I never had any. And at the age of 93, I doubted that I will have any more in this incantation. But let us say, unusual talents, especially along esoteric lines, manifest quite early. And if you know how to look for them, then you got something. You got a clairvoyant kid. You got a new junior Edward Casey or whatever it may be. But otherwise you won't. So let's say, I still had a couple of points, but I always do, because the time is moving. But let's say, if you have the eye, the occult eye, then you will find others who have it too. And you will find others who have talents of a kindred and related nature also. So that is why it is useful to study our fellow men and women. Most men don't need too much inducement to study their fellow women, but the other way around may be different. But let us say it is important because the signs of a sage, of a seer, of a hearer, of an intuitive manifest often very early, and if they receive the right kind of encouragement and the right kind of commendation from their elders, then they will have these talents throughout their lives, and if they have further encouragement, then they will be the Edgar Cayces and the C.W. Leadbeaters and people like that of their time and of their age. And certainly I have never opposed in my little experience with people who said, oh, and the kid is imagining things. I mean, I rather approved of it. Listen, maybe your kid who is imagining things knows more without your imagination, man. See? So it's important. When the soul, the psyche, as the psychologists call it, is like a rippling lake. I lived on the shore of one of those for about 6 years in Austria, the Lake of Hallstatt, which is a very famous lake. In fact, I was reminded of it today because I was wont to tell people at that time that I live at the Lake of Lohengrin, because there are a vast number of very beautiful and very archetypal swans there. So I told them, you know, I have lived for 6.5 years on the shore of Swan Lake. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, right at the present time, there is a performance of Swan Lake. Where is it?
I think at the downtown at the Dorothy Channel.
Oh, well, that's all right. That's better than nowhere. But in any event, now in Australia, maybe some other places too, you can see many curious creatures, you know, with their kangaroos and things like that. But in Western Australia, which are a lot of big lakes, you find black swans. And they scared the heck out of me. Why? Because on the way to Australia, in the conveyance that takes you to the airport sometimes, bus-like thing. The bus-like thing, I fell asleep, and that's nothing unusual. But then I woke up with a dream. In the dream I heard a voice, the black swan, the sign of death. And I said, all right. If it's going to happen in Australia, I might as well die there. The heck with it. I kept going, you know. And look, I'm still here, many years later. So also these signs and wonders of the occult should not be taken literally. But even there, you can take if you work at it, and if you're smart, which of course I say most people are not, you know. My late and lamented sister-in-law had a saying, a frequently occurring question, and she would say, why are people so stupid? And I concur with her, and certainly there again, Friedrich von Schiller had in one of his poems, he said, gegen die, well, he don't speak German, so I should have it, gegen die Dummheit kämpfen die Götter vergebens. Against stupidity, the very gods fight in vain. Friedrich von Schiller was right. It's true. And maybe the big problem, the truly deep problem is that they don't fight against it enough. No, Schiller didn't say that. But Schiller was very sympathetic to Gnostic-like things. Like he wrote in one of his essays or one of his poems, he wrote saying that the one didn't Father. There were those who knew the Father. Where are they now? They burned them. He was referring to the Cathars, which of course is true. So, stay away from the fire. We would have been burnt if some of us had not been very careful and things like that. A few weeks ago, real crisp around here. And some the homes and habitats of some of our friends were burned. I've been here since 1953. I never saw a fire like that in Southern California. Absolutely wild. But let's see, it happens. It doesn't happen whether you are in a house or in a condo or anywhere else. It will happen. Did any of you read the downright scary article of Geoffrey Hodgson in the Quest magazine about the fire elementals? Oh my God, I don't scare easily, but I must say it's some weird imagery there, and of course he basically says that they are not after us, but if they get to us, they eat us. So, somewhat like what you might say about a cannibal. In any event, let's say I did not enumerate enough, but I thought I'll bring up a few of the definitely occult and psychic elements, and then of course there was the big excitement about spiritualism in the 19th century and so forth, that there were stimuli for the occult. And even though we may feel ourselves a little bit superior to everybody, and we say, oh, well, you know, that's it, these spook chasers, which is one term that I heard joined to spiritualists and things like that. And you know what? They don't know everything. They haven't learned everything, but they have learned some things. They have learned more than those who have learned nothing. And that's why it's a commendable enterprise for people who are interested in these things to be interested in the occult phenomena also. You know, Professor J.B. Rice, all kinds of people, my late friend and compatriot Dr. Nando Fodor, a noted psychoanalyst from New York, who ended up chasing ghosts more than he chased neuroses. Very interesting man. In any event, you know, these people were around, and in their own way, and sometimes in a roundabout way, they bring you around to something valuable. Of course, the occult world is such that you have to watch yourself that you don't get caught in any portion of it. Because it has its lure, it has its fascination, it has its ways of capturing you, and then you may be captured in a certain mindset, in a certain psychic set for a long, long time. But if you have enough discrimination and you see that that is not for you, then you can move on to greater things. And that is why Blavatsky and her movement, which is now, what's it now, is it now 150 years old?
Since 1875.
Yeah, 1875. That it had the right idea to let everybody in and to try to inform them, try to stimulate them in a commendable direction. Because that is very important. And so let's not be looking down on the spiritists, as we used to call them, and something too much, because a lot of insightful discoveries have been made by those people too. Don't put down the voodoo people too much. Maybe it's not your stick to drink rum with one hand, smoke a cigar with the other. I actually prefer cigars, but rum, I don't know. But you can make good drinks with rum if you know how. So, oh yeah. So we may not like this paraphernalia, but I had a good friend who regrettably is no longer with us, who was from Jamaica, and he showed me a lot of things, I tell you, that nobody else did. We used to refer to him as the Hungan, because that's one of the voodoo expressions for a voodoo priest. A very, very smart man, and unfortunately died of political death. I don't even like to think about it. In any event, you have to be wise, you have to be careful, you have to be discriminated, but you don't have to be a scaredy cat, because then you might up underneath a Hungarian threshold, you see, and so you don't want that. They don't do it to, they didn't do it to dogs, but they did it to cats. I think that, I know Hungary is a horse country, and that was my father's great preoccupation and profession, raising horses, how to breed horses, all that sort of thing, and the racing of horses. But I haven't heard any great enthusiasm of that sort about dogs, about cats, about any of that. But they are worth it. They are worth it, because there is no doubt, and I'm not going to go into those experiences, but there is no doubt that I have witnessed the psychism of dogs. No doubt about it at all. What they were seeing, God only knows, or another dog might know. After all, dog and God, are interchangeable. But it's very interesting. They may be what, I'll just go into that for a minute. It may be what some of the scholars call rudimentary faculties. In other words, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, whatever you call these things, are present in the animal kingdom. They become more complicated and perhaps refined in the human kingdom. But somehow that hidden life shining in every atom that Annie Besant wrote about, is there. And so if you are around animals a lot, horses, especially animals who, as the saying goes nowadays, hang out with humans a lot, they definitely have psychic or occult faculties, which if called upon can be quite dramatic. Which is one of the reasons why it's nice to have animals around. We can learn some things from them, and the human is, and I'll conclude just on that one note, The human is what the British philosopher, exiled philosopher Gerald Heard, who lived here in Los Angeles, he sat right back there in that, before that window. Anyway, Gerald Heard said the human is the only unfinished animal. Now that doesn't quite coincide with what I just said, but one thing you should not expect from me is consistency. You know. So in any event, the situation in here, I'll throw in just to see, I keep going. I'll just throw in something that among my many theosophical heresies, for which I am viewed with a jaundiced eye often, is the one that indicates that we are unfinished, unfinished in the sense that we have many of the qualities, valuable qualities that the animals do. But we are about to develop others, which the animals don't have. And that's important to keep in mind too. So I'm not advocating that any of you come in here next time with the exclamation woof woof or meow meow. So that's really not the issue. Is that there is a not so much an evolution. I don't like evolution. I am not the product of evolution, but let's say we are the products. If we are doing things right, we are the products of transformation, and that's different from evolution. Not that evidently different, but different nevertheless. So when that thing comes up, then I tell people, you know what? I am transforming. I'm not evolving. So how about that? You know? And I think that's valuable because we have gotten stuck on a certain theory of biology. And I don't think that's a very good place to be stuck. Unfortunately, evolution was the big deal in 1875, around there. And so it was, they used it, the early theosophists used it as a metaphor. See, everything has evolved to this point and you are evolving. But it's not entirely true. It's not really an evolution, but it's a transformation. Or Carl Jung called it individuation. Those I all accept. But this monkey business, I don't know. Even though Madame Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott had a stuffed monkey in their apartment in New York. It was sitting on a ledge when you came into the apartment. And underneath it was a silver plaque which said, Dr. Darwin. So obviously they made fun of it too. So that's individuation in German really means of becoming more and more yourself. What could be more glorious than that? What could be more important than that? What could be more desirable than that? If there is something, I don't know what. Anyway, I'm glad you came here. I hope you were not too bored. A little bit bored is okay, you know. And God willing, we'll go on with some more of the forces that may have impinged on H.P. Blavatsky to go on with her work. So thanks very much, guys, and ladies. Oh, is it bad now to call a lady a guy? Unless she wears pants. But on the other hand, what's the point? So, anyway.